to the live event today, and you are watching Burr Cashflow Investors. If you're not a member of Burr Cashflow, make sure you become a member. We want to thank Miss Denise at the Jesse Breyer team, which is and they are the sponsors for this for this month's, I should say, Burr Cashflow Investors broadcast. So if you guys want a loan, if you want to buy a 203K property, meaning a fix and basically a fix and live in it, which is you want to do a house hack, you want to reach out to Denise. Her information is at the bottom, and she can help you do that. If you're looking for a FHA loan, 30-year fixed loan on the back end, you're going to do a refi, which is a Burr strategy. Denise is somebody, and Jesse's team, they've done business with us for a very, very, very long time, and we're happy to have them on board. Today, specifically, we're discussing some of the biggest mistakes that people make whenever buying real estate. So first, we're going to talk about the big mistakes, meaning the kind of the big fours of buying real estate. And then we're going to talk about some of the negative factors that come into play whenever people are buying real estate. So let's start with number one. Right? One of the biggest mistakes that whenever people get into real estate investing, right? I mean, think about it this way. So when people get into real estate investing, the thought process starts something like this. Hey, I know other people, I've heard of other people that invest in real estate. I think they're successful, or I know they made money, or I heard somewhere where they make money. So I want to do the same thing. So meaning the idea of investing is appealing to people. So hence, a lot of people get into investing, right? And that's where they get all fired up and excited about it. Now, just because you are doing something that you believe is the right thing to do, meaning something like investing, doesn't mean actually you're investing. Meaning that you go buy a property that is a flip, you go buy a property that is a rental, you go buy a property that you're going to do a wholesale with, or you get it under contract. Unless you know specifically what the game plan is, unless you know specifically if you're buying the right property, right, it's going to go against you. Nobody plans on failing. So let's just be clear, right? But they do fail in planning correctly, right? Just because you have a game plan doesn't mean you're going to succeed. And when any of us set up a game plan, we all have a game plan that game plan is supposed to help us win. The problem is the next things that we're going to talk about. So when we talk about flipping, when we talk about real estate, where are the big things where people get themselves into trouble? So number one big thing where people get into trouble is that when they're buying the property, they're buying the property for too much money, right? So whenever anybody's buying the property, and we have all done it, all of us, right? There's not a single human being that if you invest in enough properties, you're going to at some point make a mistake, right? That's called being human. The best investors in the world, I guess we could say, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger would be the two biggest and the best investors when it comes to stocks, right? The name of the company is Berkshire Hathaway. That company itself was a textile mill, which was a business that went under. But they have had much, much, much more wins than losses. Hence, they are some of the biggest and the best investors in the world. So what I'm saying is this, that making a mistake is not a big deal. The problem is this, that if it's a big mistake and it takes you under, that's what we have to avoid. So the number one thing that is one of the bigger mistakes people will make when investing in real estate is that they pay too much. They just simply are paying too much for the property when they are buying the property. They don't account for the numbers as well as they should. Now, this is not something that is done on purpose, of course, but they're way too optimistic, right? So it's easy to point out the mistake, but how do we point out the fixes, meaning, how did they fix this, right? One of the best ways of figuring out is that you don't overpay is figuring out what are your back end numbers, right? And just because a salesperson, a real estate agent tells you, oh my God, Andrew, this property is going to sell for 450. You don't have to worry about it, right? I'm here to help you. What is the job of a salesperson? The job of a salesperson is to be a cheerleader. Their job is to be basically excited about something, right? Their job is to tell you, oh my God, it's going to work. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying necessarily they're leading you in the wrong direction, but I am saying that a lot of times, just because they say something, right, doesn't mean that it is correct. Right. So what I mean is they're hoping to make money because they're hoping you will make money. And because they're hoping to make money, they're going to go ahead and list the property with you. Hence, they're going to be much more positive about things rather than pessimistic. If you want to be a good real estate investor, in fact, if you want to be good at investing, period, you have to be a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist, right? It doesn't matter with stocks, it doesn't matter with anything. Short-term pessimism means you have to be kind of careful in the short term. You have to think, oh my God, what if it doesn't work out in the short term? If you're not worried about the downside, the upside will never happen because you will go under in that deal. Right? What I mean by that is that you're not going to be careful and you're going to make a mistake, right? If you're not that person that is not worried about the short term. And then in the long term, you have to be an optimist, because if you're not an optimist, then why would you be investing in the first place? Yeah, right? You wouldn't be investing in the first place if you're not an optimist. So this is important to understand, that you have to be a short-term pessimist, but long-term optimist. So number one mistake is when people pay too much for the property. Number two mistake what people will make is that they take on projects that they should not be taking on. So it was an interesting conversation about a week and a half ago. I was somewhere at a real estate meeting that somebody else had done, and Shantanu and I were out there. And there's this one person, supposedly, that is, what did they do? Oh, I'm a builder developer. You build and developed anything? Oh, no, but I work for a builder. So I'm sure this person is really knowledgeable, because they work for a big national firm building big stuff, right? Big contractor. And today they're like, Andrew, I don't do small projects. We're doing some bigger stuff. And they're doing projects where they're buying these properties somewhere around 350, 400. They're dumping another 500,000. So they're doing second stories. They're doing basically, a duplex down, all those sorts of things. They're digging out basements, all the stuff. And this is what they choose to do. And this is for investing, meaning these are being done for flips. And so they're like, that's our business plan, because we don't want to do small stuff. And I'm like, but why? These things take a lot of time, and relative to the amount of work, you're not going to make as much money, right? So they're like, well, yeah, but last property we made $80,000. I'm like, well, what was the sales price, right? Sales price was $922,000, right? On a $922,000 sale, you make $82,000. So what is your return on that particular product? Well, it took 14 months. Well, we made 10%. No, you didn't make 10% in 14 months. In 14 months, you actually made 8% on your money. You're going to do all this work. You can take it on a rehab that's $300,000-$400,000 to only make $80,000 when things go right. See, to me, that is inherently too high a risk, because on a smaller rehab, if you do 40,000, 50,000 rehab, you can make $40,000, and you can do that with a $250,000, $300,000 house. Why would I want to do a $100,000, $200,000 rehab to be able to only make $70,000, $80,000? That's just not enough. I'm doing way too much work to make a artificially small return. Now, I understand if you're going to do a $900,000 property and you're going to make $300,000, fantastic. But shouldn't our goal as real estate investors? Now, if you just say, hey man, I'm a builder. I do this for a hobby. I just love doing it. Great. But you can't call yourself an investor, do this much work to make this much money. That makes no sense, right? That's like saying, hey, I do 80 hours of work, but I only get paid for 40 hours. Now, unless I just love doing the work for 80 hours, right? That's different, right? That can be, oh, I'm a volunteer and I volunteer my time 40 hours a week and 40 hours I work, then that's okay. But if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to do big projects, you better be making big money. And big money meaning if I'm going to make 40 to 50,000 per flip. So perfect example, I have a property in South Holland that I'm selling right now. Bought it for 117. Sales price is somewhere around 270, and contract is somewhere around 265. So if I bought it for 117, I did about $40,000 in work into it. So 117, 120 plus 40 is going to be 160 plus carrying costs, selling costs. So add another 25,000 to it. So my all-in cost is 185. If I'm in the deal for 185, property selling for 265, well, what do I make on that property, right? I think it's a pretty good, about an $80,000 net profit. That makes sense, right? Now, that's a little bit on the high side in that particular property, so that's going to be hard to duplicate all the time. But if I'm not going to make a minimum of $45,000, $50,000 on 250, 300,000 properties, then why am I going to do all of this? So second mistake people make all the time is that they take on rehabs either that are just too much, that there's no reason to take on. See, in real estate, a lot of times the thought we have is if we do more work, we're going to make more money. Guys, life is never that way. Right? That was the old school belief of the middle class, which was, oh my God, if I'm working a lot, that means I'm going to make a lot of money. It's never that way. The person who works the hardest never makes the most amount of money. That doesn't mean hard work is not important, but it's about being strategic. Investing means you have to do more work with your mind than the amount of work you do actually on the property, meaning did you buy the property inherently as a good deal? Right? So don't confuse work with the amount of money you're going to make. So the second point was, first was the price that you pay. Second was the amount of rehab. The third one is the amount of time that it takes. So this is something that is really important to understand if you want to succeed with real estate, right? Is that generally, if you're doing flips, and I say generally, and I say flips for this reason, that what do I mean by generally? About 85 to 90% times, if you're going to flip property and the property is $300,000-400,000, right? Generally, you need to get that done in less than 6 months. From the time you purchase the property to the time you sell the property. Generally, if you don't do that in 6 months, your cost of carrying the property is going to start climbing astronomically high. And as the cost of carrying the property starts climbing, you're going to make less money. See, I know of all the flips that I've done, and of all the flips that we see, right? In Mastery, there's over 18,000 properties owned. There's thousands of properties that have been flipped. And across the board, statistically, if we look at who wins and who loses, people who know how to turn flips quickly. Quickly meaning 6 months from the time they buy it, rehab it, resell it. Now, mind you, they may put the property on the market, and it may take 7 months because the closing didn't happen. That sort of thing is different. But if you're rehabbing the property for 7, 8, 9, 10 months, guys, you're setting yourself up. Statistically, you're not going to make as much money. See, aging a bottle of wine makes it better. Aging a property that is a flip does not make it better. It sets you up for a disaster, meaning losing money. Now, what is the next one? Well, the next one should be obvious. The next one is that you didn't sell the property for what you thought you were going to sell it for, which is a lot of times people are overly optimistic with what they think they can sell the property for, right? They're not as realistic of what is a reality in today's marketplace. What is realistic that they can sell the property for? They're just not realistic with their numbers, and hence they end up selling the property too less. So basically what they're doing is they're getting way too excited, they're getting way too optimistic about what they think the property is worth, and then they end up selling the property for a lot less. So this is important to keep in mind as we understand real estate investing. So now let's look at some of the negative factors. What are some of the negative factors which most people don't consider, right? So these are the negative factors that we think about it from a mastery perspective. When we think about from a mastery perspective, we're a lot more critical in terms of even some of the small things, right, that you have to watch for. Now, in that, the first one I will bring up is a property that has had fire damage. Unless you're somebody that is very, very experienced, please do not buy properties with fire or structural damage in the property. The reason is that if you don't know what you're doing, then you're going to end yourself up in a lot of work. So an example of it is I just took over a property from somebody from Mastery, which is in Elgin. And this was a property that I believe these people had gotten the property at about 105 or so. I think I took the property from them at 110, 112, something like that. Now, the challenge with this property is, on the face of it, it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath property. So for that particular property in Elgin, it's a great price, right? It's a great price on the face of it. The problem with that property is this, that what the previous person who was doing the rehab, they left the rehab mid-rehab. And they left it because clearly they had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They clearly did not understand plumbing, because they have 15 kind of joints between, from a 10-foot run, they have 15 joints to try to basically bend the plumbing every which way. They clearly have no idea how to lay out a property and make any sense of it. They pulled absolutely no permits, right? They absolutely botched up the complete electrical. The main electrical comes in on the back side of the house, on the back left, and they put the meter all the way on the other side. Right? So you can't do that. You can't have the electrical coming in here, and you can't have your main panel. Right? That's not acceptable. There are certain regulations and rules that you have to. So with this particular property, now what I have to do is I have to undo all the work. The biggest problem that the village has, besides this, is the joists, the property, they went ahead and drilled all of them, the floor joists. Right? And they drilled all of them and they ran electrical right through it. Now, why would you do that? It's an unfinished basement. Why not just run the electrical, if it's a 2x6 or 2x8, whatever it is, why not run that right underneath that? It's an unfinished basement, for God's sake. Right? It makes no sense to go cut through the joists. Clearly, the person who bought this, the previous people who bought the property, clearly had no clue what they were doing, and then they ended up losing the property because they had to abandon ship mid-house. And this is not a difficult property to rehab. You just do it right, meaning we got the plans drawn. So Chris Badea from Mastery drew up the plans, and we're submitting it to the village, and we'll do it right. Because a lot of times to do things correctly. So if there is somebody else that had botched up a house, unless you know what you're doing, you should not take those on. And that is in the category, similar category of properties with fire damage. Because whenever property has fire damage, unless you know how to restore the property, meaning you've worked with a restoration company and you know what you're doing, that is a house you should avoid, right? The next one is going to be some of the things to look for whenever you're buying property. Am I buying a property on a busy road? The market today has changed. So unless you're going to buy the property, rent it out. For a rental, it may work, but for a flip, a busy road is going to be an issue. The second one is the property incorporated area or unincorporated area? Generally, properties in unincorporated areas don't sell as quickly. Well, is there an airplane noise? Now, in some areas, if there's an airplane noise, nobody cares, right? But in some areas, that may be a big detractor. So if you're right under the path of O'Hare, if you live right by O'Hare, is that a factor? Do you have those big windows? Now, people who live there, they can't hear those things, right? Because not only are those houses have those big windows, but that can be a negative factor for some people. For other people, how about schools? Good, bad, indifferent schools are people, is that going to affect your back end value? Perfect example is there are some towns like in, say, Brookfield. You have one street where the left side of the street goes to a good school. The right side of school goes to a school which doesn't have as high a rating. Right? Now, that's going to depend. So if you bought a property and when you're running your comps, you ran the comps and you didn't take that into account, that's going to basically have an effect, because people who are going to be residents of Brookfield, they're going to know that. They're going to know, hey, which school district you're in. And it's not good or bad where you bought the property, right? Even in areas where the school is not as good, people are still living there, not an issue. But property prices will certainly get affected. Aurora would be the same thing. There's a part of Aurora that's going to be super expensive. Because why? Because they have the right school. So something to consider. The next one is going to be obsolete construction. Now, what do I mean by that? So a lot of times you'll have older homes where it's really weird how they're laid out. Nothing wrong with the house, but it's really weird, meaning the rooms are going to be small, the lot is huge, but yet the houses are really, really small and they're quirky. The kitchens are really small compared to what we're used to today. What we consider normal today, at one time, people just didn't consider those things, right? The way people lived, the way construction was done was very different. 5, 6 people would live in a property with one bedroom, with one bath. That was considered normal, right? Today, people are like, oh, what do you mean? I have 6 people, man, in my family. I have 3, 4 kids. I have to have at least bath and a half, 2 baths. So something to consider is that is something to think about. The next one is going to be is association fees. Right? Are they good, bad, indifferent, high, low? The next one is going to be is the wrong zoning. Have you considered that? Is it a commercial area? Right? Is there a gas station 2 doors down from the property? Is there a highway? Right? Is there a big highway that is behind that? Is there a drainage issue? Are there any structural issues? We talked about structural issues. The next one is going to be, is there an oil tank? Now, these are all the checklist items on the mastery on the one-pager that we want people to look at. But this is something you need to consider. The next one is going to be is, how about location? What do you think about the location? Is the block good? Is the block not so good? The next one is going to be, how about power lines, right? Just recently, somebody, they bought a property and the power line is here and the house is here. As soon as you open the back door, it goes bzzz, you hear the high tension lines right in the back, right? And they're like, well, Andrew, the property's not selling. Well, guess what? People don't want to radiate all the time, right? I'm kidding, of course. But people see that, and I don't know if there's any scientific proof that it's good, bad, indifferent. Maybe it's nothing. But clearly, when there's that sound, it freaks out a lot of people. You see these big, huge, gigantic monster towers in the back with high tension lines. Now, if it was a rental, would it make as big a difference? Maybe not. But for a flip, certainly, unless you're basically giving it away, meaning unless you're really, really pricing it lower, it probably will make a difference. So just something to think about. Next one is going to be is year built. Right? Are you in an area where the average year built, if it's 70s and you have this house, which is a 1900 house? Well, that may have an effect, right? The next one is going to be is that, is there excessive rehab or fire damage? We already covered that, so I'm going to go through that. How about the lot, right? The lot can have an effect, right? If you have no backyard, right, and you have a side yard, or if you have a front yard, or the lot is really bad, or if you share a driveway with somebody next door. Next one, and this one is one that a lot of people miss, and that is a floodplain, right? Do you have a floodplain? Do you not have a floodplain, right? That's something important. Shared driveway, we already talked about it. Asbestos, is there asbestos in the property? How about crime? How about train tracks? Train tracks is a big issue. Mold, and the last one is going to be taxes. And this is an important one. So there's a lot of places. Now, if you're in Florida, if you're in Arizona, if you're in Tennessee, this is not going to be an issue. If you're in Indiana, this is not going to be an issue. But if you're investing in the Chicago market, well, guess what? You can have a town. Country Club Hills is notorious for this. You can have one house where the taxes are $9,000, house right next to it, similar homes, and the tax is $5,000. I mean, think about it. If you bought the one with $9,000 with taxes as a flip, guys, guess what? People may love your home, but their payments every month are higher by $100 and $150 than the house next door, and they're not going to buy your property. Or they're going to knock your price down, even though by a year and a half into it, you can get the taxes adjusted by appealing them, but it's not going to happen right away. So it becomes really important to understand what are the factors that are negative factors versus what are the factors that you avoid and are really going to create a problem whenever you're selling a property. Having said that, this is Andrew. If you are not a member of Burr Cashflow Investors, make sure you become a member, because every time you become a member or you invite other friends of yours to join, when you join, we will add you to our next drawing, which is for a cruise for 2. And just to remind everybody, so that's the drawing we're going to do in 2 weeks. when we do the 3-day event. And the 3-day event is February 24, 25, and 26. Again, that's 24, 25, and 26. Go to andrewholmesevents.com, register. If you are not registered, prices go up. On Monday is when prices go up. So please make sure that you register on time. Super excited. See you guys at the 3-day.